Imagine walking through ancient Athens, bustling streets, merchants selling olives, and in the middle of it all, Socrates in debate. People gathered around, not to watch a play or a speech, but to hear a man question the deepest truths about life. And from those conversations, his student Plato would build one of the most powerful visions of philosophy, a vision that points upward toward the divine. Today, we will explore Plato's ideas about God, not in the sense of later religions, but in the way a Greek philosopher sought the highest principle of reality. Plato lived in the 4th century before Christ, at a time of great political turmoil in Athens. His teacher Socrates had been condemned to death. This marked Plato forever. He realized that human opinions, even in a democracy, could be deeply unjust and blind to truth. And so Plato turned his gaze higher. If truth could not rest on the shifting sands of public opinion, then perhaps it must rest on something eternal. In dialogue after dialogue, Plato returned to one central question: what is the ultimate source of goodness, order, and reality? For Plato, the answer lay beyond the visible world. The things we see, trees, animals, people, are only shadows of something greater. This is his famous theory of forms. Every just act points to the form of justice. Every beautiful sight reflects the form of beauty. And all forms come from a higher source. But among these forms, Plato speaks of one that stands supreme, the form of the good. It is the ultimate reality, shining like the sun. Just as the sun gives light so that our eyes can see, the good gives truth so that our minds can know. Without it, nothing could be understood. This is where Plato's philosophy rises into theology. The good is not just a principle of order, it is almost divine, a source of being, truth, and meaning. Plato never says directly, "This is God." But when he describes the good, we hear the language of reverence, awe, and transcendence. He tells us that the good is beyond being, surpassing it in dignity and power. In other words, higher than all existence we can grasp. For Plato, philosophy was not just an abstract game. It was a kind of ascent, a spiritual journey of the mind. To think rightly was to come closer to the divine. So in his academy, Plato trained his students not only in logic, but also in moral discipline, because truth and goodness, for him, were inseparable. The one who seeks truth must also seek virtue, and the one who seeks virtue, if he follows it to the end, will ultimately be led toward the good itself. This is why Plato could say, to love wisdom, philosophia is already to begin loving what is divine. And so our journey begins, from the streets of Athens to the academy, to the shining form of the good, the highest vision of Plato's thought. To understand how Plato saw the divine, we need to look at one of his most famous images, the Allegory of the cave. Plato asks us to imagine human beings trapped in a dark cave since birth, chained so they can only face the wall. Behind them burns a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, others carry objects whose shadows are cast on the wall. For the prisoners, the shadows are reality. They name them, they debate them, but they know nothing beyond these flickering images. Now imagine that one prisoner is freed. At first, he is blinded by the fire, but slowly he turns, walks upward, and leaves the cave. Outside, he sees the real world. Mountains, rivers, living creatures, not shadows, but the true forms of things. Finally, he looks at the sun itself, and he realizes this is the source of light, the source of truth, the reason all can be seen. The cave is our ordinary world. The shadows are the illusions of sense experience. The sun is the form of the good, shining above all. In this story, Plato shows that the human soul is not made to stay in darkness. It is called to rise, to see what is eternal. Notice the language: ascent, liberation, illumination. Philosophy is not just thinking, it is awakening, almost a conversion of the whole person. For Plato, the divine is not found in myths of gods quarreling. It is found in the shining source of goodness itself. The good is beyond stories. it is reality itself. And yet, this journey is not easy. Most prisoners, he says, would resist. They would laugh at the one who returned to tell them the truth. Worse still, they might even kill him. And here we hear an echo of Socrates, executed for leading people out of the cave of ignorance. But Plato believed the risk was worth it, because to live without truth is to live in shadows, and to live in truth is to live in the light of the good. This is why, for Plato, the highest form of life is the philosophical life, not because it is clever, but because it is closest to the divine. Philosophy, then, is a kind of training of the soul. It teaches us to turn away from shadows and toward the eternal source of reality. And when we glimpse the good, Plato says we are transformed. Our desires change, our values shift, and our lives begin to reflect the divine order. This is why education, in Plato's thought, was never just about skills or careers. It was about guiding the soul toward the light. And the highest knowledge, the knowledge of the good, is the crown of all learning, the end of philosophy, and the beginning of wisdom. The soul that reaches it, Plato tells us, has touched something eternal. Plato did not only speak of the good, he also gave us a vision of the soul and how it connects us to the divine order. In the dialogue Phaedrus, he describes the soul as a chariot with two horses, one noble and disciplined, the other wild and unruly. The charioteer is reason. When reason governs, the soul rises upward, toward truth, beauty, and the vision of eternal things. But when the lower impulses dominate, the chariot falls back to the earth, trapped again in the cycle of ignorance and desire. This image shows Plato's conviction that the human being is not just a body. We carry within us something immortal. For Plato, the soul existed before birth. It contemplated the forms, the eternal realities. But in being born, it forgot them. Philosophy, then, is a kind of remembering. To learn truth is not to invent it, but to recall what the soul once knew. And so, the philosopher's journey upward is not just an escape from shadows, it is the soul returning to its true home. This theme also appears in the Timaeus, where Plato presents a grand vision of the cosmos itself. The universe, he says, is the work of a divine craftsman. Plato calls him the demiurge, not a god of myth or war, but an eternal mind that shapes chaos into order. The demiurge looks to the forms, and by imitating them creates a cosmos that is beautiful, harmonious, and alive. For Plato, the world is not an accident. It is rationally ordered, full of meaning, and at its root lies a divine intelligence. This vision was revolutionary. The gods of Homer had been powerful but capricious. Plato's divine was rational, eternal, and good. It was not bound by jealousy or whim. Instead, it was the very principle that makes order possible in the first place. This is why Plato often spoke of the philosopher as a kind of mediator between earth and heaven, with one foot in the city but eyes fixed on eternity. To live philosophically was to align one's soul with the order of the cosmos, to make oneself as far as possible like the divine. In fact, in the Theaetetus, Plato has Socrates say, "The highest human task is to become like God as far as a human being can." This did not mean claiming divine power. It meant living in truth, in justice, and in harmony, reflecting the eternal order in the soul. And so the vision comes together. The good is the source, the demiurge the craftsman, the soul the mirror, called to return to its origin. Plato's philosophy, then, is not only about knowledge. It is about transformation, a way of life shaped by the presence of the divine. We have followed Plato from the streets of Athens to the academy, to the heights of the good itself. But what does all this mean for us? Plato is not offering us a myth or a superstition. He's offering a vision of reality, that truth, goodness, and order have a source beyond us. That source is not just a story about God's quarreling. It is a principle of ultimate unity, a divine reality that sustains all being. This is why Plato's philosophy feels so timeless. It is not only about Athens or about Greece. It is about the human longing for what is eternal. When Plato speaks of the good, when he describes the soul's ascent, we recognize something in ourselves, a desire for light, for clarity, for meaning. It is as if Plato is holding up a mirror. He shows us that we are not satisfied with shadows. We are creatures who yearn for the sun. And so his philosophy is not distant. It challenges us. Are we content to live in the cave, or will we turn toward the light? To live by Plato's teaching is to practice discipline, to guide the passions with reason, and to let the soul rise toward the order of the cosmos. It is to believe that truth exists, that goodness is not an illusion, and that the highest things are worth seeking. Plato reminds us that philosophy is not about winning arguments, it is about shaping the soul so that it may reflect the eternal good. And though centuries have passed since he wrote, his challenge remains: to seek wisdom, to ascend, to become like the divine. This is why his dialogues still inspire, still unsettle, still draw us upward. They are not simply books, they are invitations. Invitations to question, to wonder, to step beyond appearances, and to look toward what is eternal. Plato does not give us all the answers, but he gives us the direction. He shows that philosophy, at its best, is a road that leads toward the divine. So perhaps the question we must ask is simple: where are we looking, at shadows or at the sun, at opinion or at truth? Each of us carries the same choice as those prisoners in the cave: remain in the dark or begin the ascent. And so, as we close, let Plato's words echo within us. The highest human task is to become like God, as far as a human being can. May this call to seek truth and goodness inspire us to live with clarity and courage, turning our gaze always toward the light. Thank you for walking with me through this journey. If you enjoyed this exploration of Plato's vision, subscribe and join us as we keep seeking wisdom together. For philosophy, as Plato shows us, is nothing less than the love of what is eternal.